Now, next what we're going to do is we're going to create an array adapter or a course array adapter, which is a class that will take care of connecting our course list item here, okay, which is going to be corresponding to a row of a course with the data, which is going to be each course that we create, and then make sure that we are able to display that on a list view. So inside of our data here, I'm going to right click, say new. I'm going to create a new Java class, and I'm going to call this course array adapter. So, okay, and there we go. This course array adapter here will extend the array adapter class, which will then pass here the types of objects that we're going to be passing in through our array adapter. In this case, it's just going to be our course type. Okay, there we go. So because we're extending, we need to implement a few things here. Create a constructor. The constructor here will match. Let's use this one here, which has context, resource, and of course the objects that we're passing. Say okay, and there we go. I'm gonna close this down a little bit. Okay. So now that we have all of that, these are annotations, which allows our compiler to make sure that this resource here is of type layout res. Okay, and this is not null. The context should not be null, and also our course will not be null. Okay, so what we can do here, I'm actually going to change this to something else. I'm going to say, I'm going to make sure that this is actually just a list. Okay, list of type courses, like that. And I'm going to call this objects. That's fine. Okay, let's create a few instance variables here. I'm going to say private context, call this context, private. I'm going to create a list of type courses, course in this case. I'm going to call this objects, call this courses. In fact, let's change this to courses as well. Okay, change that to courses to make sure it matches. All right, so inside of our constructor here, what are we going to next thing? We're going to say this, that context, and I'm going to just pass the context. So we're just setting things up here, this, that courses, and I'm just going to set these two courses that have been passed in. Okay. Now we need to override a few things here. I'm going to say command N. Okay, I'm going to say go to override methods. Now the method that I'm going to override is going to be get view. So this one here says get view. I'm going to click on that. Perfect. So this one here, just like what we saw before when we create view, recycler views, as well as on our fragment, right? When we are creating the view, it's doing the same thing here, right? So we're getting the view. So for this to work, we are going to inflate. So I'm going to get rid of this. I'm going to create my own view, and then inflate that view from our resource folder here, from our layout. Okay, so we're going to be inflating our course list item. Okay, so we're creating that view. But for that to work, we actually need to do something first, right? We need to create we need to be able to get our inflator. We need to be able to instantiate an inflator layout object, right? So we're going to say layout. Why? Because we don't have access to it anywhere here, and we need that to be able to inflate. I'm going to say layout inflator. There we go. I'm going to call this inflator is equal to context. We need the context dot get system service, because we need that to align everything together. So I'm going to say pass here activity. Okay, dot. I'm going to say layout inflator service. That's what I need. I'm going to have an issue here because I need to cast. Perfect. So now that we have our layout inflator here, I can go ahead and say view is equal to inflator that inflate from r.id dot we call this course, and of course we have an issue. We need to import our r, so say command enter. Option enter, and we are going to import class. There we go. Notice at the top we have our R, which will allow us to then get all of our resources. So r.id dot, again, course. Actually, it has to our layout. There we go. And I'm gonna get here my course list item. And the next thing I need to pass is going to be null, because we don't need anything else. Okay. And next, what I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna go ahead and say return view. Now that we have our view, which means that we have our course list item here, we're going to go ahead and fetch the image view as well as the text view and set it up so that we are able to then add the data, the correct image view and the correct text. Okay, let's go back to our course array adapter here. Right after we have our view, right, we can go ahead and start instantiating things. I'm going to say image view object. I'm going to call image view. I'm going to make it an image view. We need to cast it. Now I'm going to say view, right? Because we can't just say find view by ID, because remember we're inside of our get view. So we're creating our view. So we have to use our view in order to get any widget inside of our view. So view dot find view by ID, and I can say r.id dot, and I think we called, what did we call this? We call course image ID. Let's go back. It's called course image ID and such. Okay, and then I'm going to say image view dot set image resource ID. And here, this is where I'm going to pass our course object, but we don't have our course object. So in fact, inside of here, I'm going to create I'm going to say course. I'm going to say course is equal to, I'm going to use course sys that get position and pass the position as such. So what are we doing here? We're instantiating our course object, and we're saying courses that get, we're getting the position of this current course here, and we're passing the position, which is going to be an integer. So we know exactly which course that we are talking about as they are laid out in a list view. Okay, we'll see that in action pretty soon here. So now that we have our course, then we can call this here, pass it in, say course dot, we can then call the get image resource ID, right? Because that's what we need. Like this, and of course we have to pass the context. In this case, I'm just going to say context as such. Okay, so we're setting the image view to show the actual image that we are setting up with our inside of our image ID correspond to each of these images that we're going to be adding soon. All right, perfect. So if we need that, we can do that with the text as well. So now we can say text view, call text view is equal such. Of course, I'm going to say view dot get, actually find view r.id dot, say course name, and we're going to say text view dot set text. I'm going to say course dot get course name. And that's it. Okay. So when we return our view, when we do return our view, we will have an image view, we'll have a text view as well. Okay, it seems like it doesn't like this, it's redundant. We can just go ahead and get rid of it then. Let's get rid of that. We have clean code. Okay, so now we're done with our course array adapter. Next, what I'm going to do inside of a data again, I'm going to right click, say new Java class. Now I'm going to create a course data, which is going to be a class, a helper class that will take care of creating our courses. Okay, so data as such. Okay, doesn't extend anything. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to create a list of all of these images which correspond to courses. Okay, so I already did that. I'm going to paste it in here. So what we're doing is a string. So we're creating an array of type strings that has all of these course names. Okay, so first course, second course, and so forth. Okay, which corresponds to all of these items here. So there's about 3, 6, 7 items. All right, so next what I'm going to do here, I'm going to create a public method which will return an array list of courses. All right, I'm going to call this course list. What this will do, we'll just go ahead and generate an array list of courses. So that way we can use that to populate our list view. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and say array list here. I'm going to create a new array list of type course, call this list, go to new array list. Okay, so we're going to add all of the courses inside of this list, which is array list type, and then we're going to return it. All right, so I'm going to say create a for loop here, and I is equal to 0. I is less than our course array, course names array dot length. Let's just say I plus plus. Okay, so it's going to loop through. As it loops through, we're going to create a course. So I'm going to say course object, call this course. Let's go to new course. We're going to use our course, and we're going to use the first constructor here, which pass string. So for our string, I'm just going to go ahead and say course name. I'm going to pass the I, okay, because each course has, so the first time is going to be course name with this, okay, and then for the next one, which is going to be the image, so I'm going to say course names again and pass I. But now what I'm going to do, I'm going to just say replace the empty, all right, with that. So what am I doing here? Well, when we create our course, let's go to our course object. So I'm using our course constructor here, which takes in a course name and a course image. Well, what I did now, you notice here, all of these course names, 1st through 7th, they all have the same kind of name, right? Except they're all lowercase, and also they don't have any spaces. So what I'm going to do here, what I'm saying here is I'm saying for the image name, okay, I'm going to go through our course's name here because they all have the same names as the images. So that was all intentional. But to get the actual image here, I'll have to replace these spaces here, right? So with no spaces, so it's going to be first course, no spaces in between. And I will also have to say dot to lowercase, because now I want to make sure that for the name, it has to be the course name as it is here, but it also has to be lowercase as well as no space in between. Okay, very cool trick here. And then I'm going to say list. I'm going to take our list object array list here. Just going to ahead say add. I'm going to add course. Each time we loop through, we create a course object, which with the name and the image, and then we add to our list. Okay, and then of course we have to say return list. Okay, very nice. Now before we can use all of this, we need to go back to our resources here, our layout. So I'm going to go to our my fragment. You notice that earlier we just added this text view because we just want to make sure that things are working okay. So I'm going to get rid of this. Now what I'm going to add here is going to be a list view, as you can see over there. I'm going to make it the width to match parent, and I'm going to wrap content its height. Now the most important thing here, of course, we have to have an ID. Now, this is very important here. We need to give it an ID. So I'm going to say Android. I'm going to say ID as such. Okay. Now, we are not going to just give our own ID. We're going to use the namespace Android because we're talking about a list view that is connected to our list fragment. Okay. So we have to use the @Android, and I'm going to say ID, and there it is already something called list. Okay. That's very important. Right? If we add our own ID, like we did here, add plus ID, that's our own ID, our custom ID, we're going to have issues. So you have to make sure that you set list view, and for ID, say @Android, we are using Android namespace library, and say ID, and we're using their list. And you can see right away, we have it here. All right, so now once we have that, let's go to our my fragment here. What we're going to do at the top here, I'm going to say, I'm going to override the onCreate. Right, I'm going to say on create. There we go. I'm going to use that one. Okay. This on create here, this is where we're going to set up our data and our list fragment. Now, the next thing we need to make sure here is that this is not just going to be a fragment. This is going to be now a list fragment. Make sure it support Android there. Okay. Get rid of that. There we go. Yeah, that's It's very important. So now inside of our onCreate here, remember we are inside of our onCreate, which we just created now. It's overriding. Okay. So at the top here, what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a list of type courses. Okay, and I'm going to call this courses. And then I'm going to go ahead and create and instantiate our course data here. I'm going to say new course data. I'm going to call the course list, which returns, if you remember correctly, just a list of courses. Okay, my course list that I can use. So inside of our own create here, I'm going to just go ahead. First, I'm going to instantiate our array adapter. So I'm going to say course array adapter. I'm going to call this adapter such is equal to new course array adapter. Of course, we have to pass the context. I'm just going to say get activity, right? This is very important because fragment activity. So we need this context there. And then next, I'm going to pass in r.layout. It's going to be my course list item because this is where we're going to pass each course object, right? And then I'm going to pass the data. What data is going to be? It's going to be courses because that's going to be our list of all the courses that we are generating inside of our course data here. Okay. Very nice. So not too complicated. Once we have our adapter, which again, we are passing in the current activity context, that's very important. And then we're passing the course list item, which is this layout here we created, because that's where we are going to put all of these courses. And we have to pass the actual data, which is the courses, right? And we know that we're getting all of that from our course data here, which is just a helper class with a helper method that creates courses and returns those courses for us to work with. Again, in a production application, you would probably have this coming from a database or an API or somewhere else. Okay, but for this now, this works. Perfect. So now that we have that, it's time for us to call the set list adapter. That's a method that we can call, and we are going to pass our adapter. That's it. Okay. Now, if we save this with any luck, we should be able to see. Look at that. Our courses are looking really good. But now we have an issue here. So it looks like our images are not really showing. Let's go ahead and see what's going on. All right, let's see what the problem might be. Maybe we need to go to our array, course array adapter. Let's see, image view, we're getting resource ID, passing context. Let's go open our course here. So get image resource, get resources, get identifier. There's the problem. So we're saying this, that course name. Of course, it's not going to give us it's not going to give us anything because it's just going to give us the name of the string name, which is not customized so that we can actually show the image. So we need to actually call this course image, not course name. There's that course image. Save, give it a run. Now we should be able to see, there we go. Now we have all of our courses. Very, very nice. Okay, so we were able to use a list view in conjunction with list fragment to indeed create a list row, custom one, and then inflate those views into our fragments and show those inside of our activity. Okay, so all of these obviously can be done using plain activities, but I just want to show you how to use fragments for the reasons that we've discussed earlier when we started this section on fragments. Yeah, it gives you a lot of flexibility, and I do realize that at first this seems like overkill. There's just a lot of code that you have to create, but in the long run, for creating applications that can dynamically be flexible in terms of where they are running, if they're running on a phone or a tablet or a bigger size device, you can then create fragments that can morph into activities depending on those situations. And that's the power of fragments. And we'll talk more about fragments and how to take care of situations when you have to dynamically show user interfaces that work well on a phone and on a tablet. Okay? Perfect. It's good progress. I will see you next.